in Cardio Week 2021. I have here with me Adama. Adama, do you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Adama. I'm a co-founder of Black in Cardio and also a research assistant at UCL, where I work on preclinical imaging in cardiovascular diseases. And I'm really excited to co-host this panel with you today, Jace.
Awesome. And yeah, my name is Jason Amati. I am a PhD student, and I will also, and I'm here to co-host with Adama. We have here today with us two guests. We have Ayana, Martin, and Anthony Hinton, who will be telling us, talking to us through their journeys. So we're really excited to have them both with us today. I'm going to start off first with Ayana. Could you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. So thank you for having me. Again, my name is Ayana Martin, and I completed my PhD in molecular medicine and translational science at Wake Forest University. And I studied basically immunology. I had a clinical focus to my research. My thesis advisor was an MD. Well, I had two MD co-advisors. And then my committee, of course, was PhD. So I had dual access to lab and bench, or bench and bed, I should say. From there, or while I was in grad school, actually, I had the opportunity to start a biotech business based on this global competition of a business plan that was open-ended, and you could work with the government here in the States to license the patent. And so I was successful at that with a team. But that really sparked my interest in scientific communication and being able to translate scientific information to various audiences. And so by the end of my PhD, I no longer wanted to be on the bench side, but I still wanted to impact the bedside. And so I pursued a career in scientific communication, starting in healthcare advertising as a medical consultant for not quite the commercials you see on TV. There is a medical consultant for that. But I worked with the materials that went out to the doctors. And from there, I became a medical science liaison for a pharmaceutical company. I was at one company for almost 3 years, and I just recently switched to a new company where I am a regional medical director for rare disease. The company is called Horizon Therapeutics, and I have enjoyed my journey. It was tough, but I promise there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Awesome. I have so many questions for you, but I'm going to start off. I'm going to let Antona introduce himself first, and then we'll get back to both of you. So Antona, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Antonor Hinton, but you can call me AJ. And I'm at Vanderbilt University. I'm in the Department of Molecular Physiology and Biophysics, and I'm an assistant professor there, tenure track. And my laboratory utilizes two techniques called serial block phasing, SEM, or scanning electron microscopy, and FIBSIM, focused ion beam scanning electron microscopy, to investigate molecular mechanisms that regulate molecule transfer and morphology changes between mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum, and how these mechanisms are altered during pathophysiology, such as states in type 2 diabetes or diabetic cardiomyopathy, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. It's nice to meet everybody. And I also own a consulting company as well, if anybody wants to ask about industry things too. Okay.
Oh, awesome. So this question goes out to both of you. So whoever wants to go first, I can go first, and then we can carry on. How did you figure out what you wanted to do? Like to get to, is this what you wanted to do as you were growing up, or is it something that kind of like the opportunities came along the way?
So I can share my story because it was not what I anticipated. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, just didn't know what kind. So there was like veterinarian, pediatrician, surgeon, PhD. So my journey to PhD was actually financially based. And, that might seem shallow, but there's MD PhD programs. And so I specifically applied because I was on the fence. I applied to programs that had the translational aspect where I could kind of have access to both and then make a decision. I felt I didn't do a master's degree. So I felt like when I got my PhD, I'd be young enough to still do an MD if I wanted to. But when I did my rotations with MDs, I decided patients were too volatile to work with. You don't get the perfect patient, and you do have to take the bad with the good. And I was just not okay with that. So I decided to stay in the PhD track only and impact medicine from that side. So I worked in sepsis, which has no diagnostic test. It has no specific treatment. And so being able to help the bedside understand how to kind of reverse sepsis, or at least understand what is happening to see what we have that can reverse it. Wake Forest, at the time that I was there with my co-advisors, had a fantastic survival rate, which with sepsis is about 50-50. And so Wake Forest had a fantastic survival rate. So it was great being in the lab. But again, I mentioned I pivoted to scientific communication. And that really came from a hallmark moment of my PhD journey. It's supposed to be a 5-year program. At year 4, I had to start over. New lab, new advisors, new projects, and everyone that I started with was graduating. So I was devastated, of course, but I didn't know anymore what I wanted to do. And so I literally sat in a room like this and was like, what do I love about the PhD program? What do I hate about it? And if I could design a career for myself, what would that look like? And do I even need this PhD to do it? And so I decided I loved talking about the science. I love the conferences. I love the banter with other doctors about, this is my research. What do you think? I loved that aspect. I was like, if I could just do that, be the face of science, that's it. And that's when I found the medical science liaison career. And so I pivoted to that. I definitely needed my PhD. So I was like, all right, year 4. So my PhD got extended to 7 years, but I finished in those last 3 years with great support. So that's kind of how I chose my journey. I had to pivot a couple of times, but I literally designed it myself.
So I'm a little bit different. So I didn't grow up thinking about science as much. I just kind of grew up thinking about doing different tasks and kind of how it led me to science. So my grandparents used to garden a lot. And so I got into botany when I got to graduate school and also in undergrad. So during undergrad, what made me interested in the sciences was because I had a CNA license. I did an allied health science class, so I thought I was going to be a nurse and a biology major when I got to undergrad. And my professor, Dr. Clark, told me, you should pick one. Both majors are really hard and very complex to do. And I told him I can do both. And then after kind of a semester, I was like, you're right. Let's kind of plan this out. Let's figure out what I could do. And so he says, keep your double major. But then let's meet over the summer, and do some research together, or can I introduce you to a researcher? And so he introduced me to a researcher, and I did that, and it was in neuroscience, and it was really fun. And I was like, this is interesting, but I want to do more. I want to get back to doing plants. And so I did a summer internship in plants and looked at how to make fruit ripening better. And then I did another summer internship the following summer in plant pathology. And that was interesting because I was like, okay, now I'm looking at disease mechanisms, things like that. But the experience was challenging in different ways because at that time I got diagnosed with my sleeping disorder. So it was kind of rough for me to do the research. I was more like realized trying to figure out why I was tired. So I actually switched fields to biomedical sciences. It was recommended from my bench mentor. He was like, maybe that's more interesting to you. Both were interesting. It's just that at the time I just, was going through some challenges, and I switched based upon his advice. And after that, I applied for the prep program via a conference in Abercrombie where I saw Dr. Gail Slaughter, who kind of really changed my life and told me that I could get a PhD. And so for me, I was thinking like maybe I would get a master's or something like that. But she really encouraged me to do a PhD, but said, I need a little bit of extra training. I was in the MARC program, so I had a concept of, what a PhD was, but I wasn't really sure about like how to go about getting it. And so for me, the MARC program plus Dr. Slaughter really helped me to mold my confidence. And she talked to me till I finished my undergraduate degree. Then we transferred into the postbac program. And then the rest is history. So I stayed at Baylor to do a PhD in integrative and molecular biomedical sciences, and it was really fun. And at that time, I kind of combined all the things that I had learned in undergrad. So I looked at neuroscience. I took different drug compounds that could be synthesized from plants to actually look at changes in blood pressure. And so it was really nice. And so I deleted ER alpha and the mutyl amygdala to look at stress-induced hypertension. And then I did some follow-up work preliminarily with SRC1, which is a co-activator of ER alpha. And so it was really nice. But I wanted to challenge myself more, and I wanted to find a mentor that could really teach me the ins and outs of science, not only by research, but also by the challenges that I face as being a Black man. So I actually went to Iowa, and it was kind of interesting how I got there, but it was from a conference, but we can talk about that later. But Dr. E. Dale Abel, he's a famous Black scientist that studies diabetic cardiomyopathy. And he was nice enough to allow me to be in his lab. And so I did a stint in his laboratory, and it really helped me to expand my skill set. It allowed me to do some teaching, diversity, equity, inclusion work, because he allowed me to join the diversity office as well. And I got to do recruiting, and then I got to do an awesome postdoc. And then I picked up the skill set for serial block facing and FibSim because he sent me to Mayo Clinic for a visiting postdoc at the same time that I was doing my second the first postdoc. And then from there, he helped me apply for jobs. And now I'm here at Vanderbilt running my own lab, studying, a little bit different segue than what, Dale's studying, but it's really nice. And so I'm really thankful for my journey because it was very non-traditional. If it wasn't for the mentors that I had, I would have never been able to make pivotal moves to know where to actually go. And so for me now, mentoring is a big component of what I do in my everyday science practice when I'm teaching, or even when I'm, not even teaching, thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or doing research. I really care about the mentorship and shaping individuals to be the best that they can, and really listening to them and having a really good relationship. So that's kind of my journey.
Thank you so much for sharing. I've just learned so much. I think being such like an early career scientist, researcher, it's really lovely hearing both of your stories. And I think something that stuck out to me for both of you is one, kind of, I would say, going with the flow of things, because we all have an idea of what we want to do. And sometimes you have to kind of experience something to be like, oh, no, maybe I should do this or I should do that. And another thing that has stuck out to me that both of you have said is the importance of having mentorship and support. So I think it'll be really cool to just segue and delve more into mentorship and support. So maybe let's start as an undergrad. So before you even, maybe in high school, before you went to undergrad, how you felt then, and then moving on to as you experience science a bit more, how did people support you? What were you thinking? Because I know currently I'm in the space where I think now I'm kind of gaining those mentors in my life. But before I was like, oh my gosh, I'm this headless chicken and I have no clue what to do. So it'll be really nice to see how your thought process has changed. And Dr. Hinton, as you said, like mentorship and stuff is very important to you now. So I guess ending it off with what do you do now in terms of that space? And also with you, Dr. Martin, how mentorship has helped you and how you also use it now after going through all those things, because you guys are both at like, cool points in your journey.
So kudos to Abercams. I just wanted to say that because I got my very first oral presentation award at Abercam. So that kind of like launched the journey of presenting and talking science. But to the point of mentorship, so when I was younger, I just remember, I don't know if it was because my mom just had two kids close in age and wanted us to play together, but I always had like hands-on like activity books. And my mom is in education. My entire family was in education, a teacher or, in the office or programming, some type of education. So summer times were never off of school for me. It was just mom school. And so I just came to enjoy what the scientific method is, but it was natural. It was just curiosity, fostering the curiosity. So when I was younger, as far as mentors come, it was because I was excited about it and I just wanted to learn more. So as children, you just ask a lot of questions and people are pretty much happy to answer it. And, just if one person had a lot of answers, I just kind of like clung to them. So like by the time high school came around, I will say that I went to school where I went to school, my math teacher and my science teacher were so much fun. So it never felt too hard to give up. My math teacher, like every Friday we had games. Now we live in the age of technology, but before, having like a digital whiteboard, he had one. And I was just fortunate to be, luck or opportunity, I don't know what you want to call it. I didn't choose that, it chose me, but I took full advantage of it. So on Fridays, we would all get to play on the board. Fridays was like game days, but it wasn't math per se, it was the critical thinking. And so again, just fostering the curiosity. My science teacher, same thing. We had like experiments at the school pool. We built like catapults to launch watermelon and pumpkins on the field at the end of the year. I grew up in California, which does not have snow except for the mountains, but my city's at the bottom of the mountain. So the seniors, when they could go off campus, those with pickups would like go get the snow, bring it. We'd have a snowball fight at school. But our science teachers always like made sure to do something with the snow. And so it was just always fun. But when I got to college, now you're like, I have to tailor my career. What do I do? How do I do this? And so because I knew science was for me. Everything I did was science. I watched CSI, forensic science. I watched, Bill Nye the Science Guy. So I was excited when he came back to Netflix. Actually, I got my first medical science liaison job doing a presentation on a topic I found from Bill Nye the Science Guy. But in college, finding a mentor was, again, my curiosity was always piqued, and someone saw that spark in me and wanted to foster it further. So the two kind of collided in that sense. And I just always made sure to ask questions. So whether I had a good mentor or a bad mentor, I could get something out of it because I was always curious and asking enough questions. But by the time I went to grad school, it was super important. And I realized that because everyone always found me, I didn't know how to find them, which is a critical part of the PhD process. You have to find your mentor. So that was part of the reason why, it was a factor in why I had to start over, is that I had an opportunity to choose a mentor that really could launch me. And I didn't know how to do that properly. In the end, it worked out. But asking the questions, the hard questions too, especially being a Black woman in science, sometimes the hard questions have to be asked. And I grew up in this bubble that everyone found me. So I was uncomfortable asking some of those questions, and it did hurt me a little bit. But once I learned the questions to ask about, how can you support me? Do you have the network to support me? If not, if I come to you with an opportunity, can you do what you can do to help me get this opportunity? That became important. And so every step of my career has been, I found someone who just matched my excitement. My PhD advisor that I graduated under had been in the field for over 50 years. When I went into healthcare advertising, I had this bombshell of a lady as my advisor, and she cursed and she just said what was on her mind, but she had a good heart and a good vision and a good structure and plan. And I followed it. And when I told her, if I deviated from it, she was not thrown off that I deviated from her plan because my plan was a little different. She was just like, that's cool. How can I help? And now I have a career where, my last position, my manager, he had nothing to lose. He had been in the game 20, 30, 40 years and had no real desire to climb the ladder because he had held all kind of leadership positions. So he had nothing to lose by giving me opportunity. So I was able to ask for anything I dreamed of, no matter how big or small. If it was too big, he was okay to let me know that. And I trusted his experience that it was too big, but I could get there, and here's how. And my current manager is a Black woman in science, PhD, great experiences. And I think the unique thing about my new company that I really love is that in the industry, it's small. You run into people, you work with them now, you leave them, you come back and work with them. I think my team has all worked together at some point in other parts of their careers. And so they work well together, they like each other, and I wanted to be part of that because I want my career to look like that. And so it was just you know, finding someone who could match my joy in science, match my energy, my big dreams, and who always wanted to help me.
Amazing. That I think, yeah. How do I even put it? Like, you know, when you just hear something, it's like, yes, this resonates so well. I need to gather my thoughts. So while I gather it, Dr. Hinton, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. That was beautiful. So for me, I integrate mentoring in how I run my laboratory. So I don't have as much time anymore to actually like be a part of the diversity office and like, you know, run a sector of like a lot of mentoring programs or do as much mentoring as I did in my postdoc. So I concentrate on how I recruit intentionally minorities and women to the laboratory. Anybody's welcome, but I try to find applicants that may not get, you know, as much press at a mainstream like tier 1 research institute. And so this is how I try to carve out that mentorship space, because then I can train individually my staff scientists or my postdocs in the laboratory on a much more intimate basis, where I can tell them, you know, okay, let's talk about the science today. Let's talk about career development, you know, on Fridays. Let's do the training for writing, things like that. So I try to tailor their experience to what they need on an individual mentoring basis, and also try to cover things, you know, more generally in lab meetings. And so for me, I try to specialize in creating a program that can help an individual thrive. That's what I do now. And then I try to dedicate more time to writing DEI articles and mentoring articles to be able to kind of help science as a whole be able to do that. Matter of fact, you know, watch out for some of the mentoring articles next year. I've done a lot. I kind of took a pause because I needed to set up my lab, but there'll be a lot that'll come out next year. And that'll kind of continue that trend. So that way I can, you know, continue to be in the space, but not as active as I used to be. And then letting people read the literature, kind of trying to figure things out. In the context of the consulting company, I love to work with my staff. I own 50% of the company. My partner owns the other 50%, but we also have staff that works for us. And so they're incredible. And they help to manage, you know, everything from day to day. But, you know, besides just, you know, giving consulting, we also try to provide mentoring as well for other individuals to be able to do the same thing that I'm doing, so that they can thrive and do well. Because it's not just about you doing well, it's also about providing a space where you can have a path for others to do well. You know, that's the thing, you know, we're transitioning from this word of pipeline to the pathway. And I think it's key for us to also create pathways, not just like little patches, you know, where 1 or 2 can get in, but, you know, a myriad of individuals. So I really think that's important. And that's kind of like how I'm carving my mentorship space now, and being intentional about applying for certain grants and then writing supplements to those grants so that I can have even more individuals that look like me or similar to get into a space that they may not have normal access to. So this is how I'm doing that. And I do occasionally still take, you know, calls when people ask, or, you know, Zoom meetings to kind of mentor them. Because I think it's very important that we get that mentorship and fill that gap, especially when you're the only one or 1 or 2. And so, you know, it's still important, you know, to have that community. And I think that mentorship works both ways. I think we also have to keep in mind that there's the thing called reverse mentorship, where your trainees or individuals that may be like apprentices that are, you know, not have as much experience as you can mentor you as well. So I also think with mentorship, you have to be able to be open to change as well and carving yourself to be better. Like I learned some things earlier today from my staff, and I'm pondering them as we're talking, and how to integrate that in, you know, to the overall mentor structure of the laboratory. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm kind of using mentorship now.
It's amazing to hear you talk about mentorship like that. I think coming from someone who is an early career researcher, and having found mentors for myself, and also not just people who've already walked the path that I'm trying to walk on, but also those who are walking the same path as me now. So my peer mentors, they've definitely had a massive impact on my journey so far. I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about industry, especially with you, Ayana. You mentioned you've done a PhD and now you're working in industry. Could you tell us kind of like what have you found to be the main difference between when you were doing your PhD and when you were kind of like in academia and what you're doing now?
I mean, aside from the workload is different. One of the biggest differences is that I almost found challenging, a little bit challenging when transitioning to industry was in graduate school. I controlled my presentations, what went in them, the order that they were in, the messages. In industry, we call it messages, but like the key points you were trying to convey. I controlled that narrative. And in industry, it is controlled for you. And so it was interesting, my journey, because in healthcare advertising, I was in the middle of that, where I got to control how the information got packaged at the direction of the pharma company. But it ultimately was what the company wanted, is motivated by a number of things. And so the first thing, of course, is it's business, it's dollars, but it's impact too. And so the integrity of the science had to maintain itself in the messages that got boiled down from the high science that we like in academia. It would get boiled down to one or two lines that had to be communicated to, sometimes it's a doctor that's not familiar with the disease. So you can't just use all the buzzwords from that disease state. You have to use something else that they'll understand in their doctor language. So boiling it down to like one or two things, but still making sure the science was not misunderstood or misinterpreted even. That was a challenge for me at first, because now I'm giving someone else's presentation. And I was like, I'm the one delivering it, so I still have to make it my own. But there's still a lot of autonomy in what I get to say and how I get to say it, because I'm the person in the room. There's still a lot of integrity, because your managers can do ride-alongs, or, if you offended the doctor or something, they can go back and report you too. But I still had some control over how the message got delivered. And I got to give feedback as well. But that was one of the biggest differences as far as like presenting. And of course, like, I'm not at the bench. I'm not doing the science anymore. So being a scientist in a field where there's MDs that do this job, PharmDs that do this job, nurses that do this job, I work with former genetic counselors. They do this job too, and they come from the clinic. So I'm high science, they're high people, and I'm not in control of the experiments anymore. So like if the company is doing clinical trials and I have to go out and talk about it, I can give feedback, but that feedback might not ever be incorporated. They might hear me out. So I'm so distant from the doing of the science. And I thought I would miss it, but me personally, I don't, because I'm still close to the science, and to me, communicating the science is more important, because that was a big thing I learned in grad school, is that trying to get my committee to understand what I'm actually doing, I thought they would just get it because they're also PhDs. They're my committee. They get my updates. But some of their questions would be like basic questions. And I'm like, you don't understand this? And that was kind of like my aha moment, that like, oh yes, I can get my PhD because I'm teaching you now. Obviously not in the beginning, but that was a page turner for me, that I can do this, and communicating the science is what is most important. So those are the two biggest differences. For me also, what drove me to industry was the statistics of getting tenure track. When I started, I did research when I was in college, all through college. And I remember that my freshman summer, I was under somebody writing a grant. And at the time, if you got into the top 10%, you're pretty much guaranteed funding. If you got 11% or 12%, high chances. And the next summer, I went back, and it has shortened to like, if you're in the top 8%, you're pretty much guaranteed funding. If you're top 10%, yeah, maybe. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is going the wrong direction. They're trying to build this pathway. I'll use Dr. Hinton's word, this pathway for minorities to get in here. And the numbers are squeezing. And I was just like, now I'm numbers driven. I'm statistically speaking, this is going to be even harder. am I just going to be at the bottom for a long time? I got my PhD to be at the top. So that drove me just statistically away from staying in academia, because I just did not want to keep fighting for my place. I really wanted the science to get done, be communicated, get out there and help somebody. And so I had to find another place in the pathway of science to help somebody. And again, I love talking about the science. And so I found a new place to be, and I have loved it every step of the way.
That's awesome. So, what can you tell us about how exactly your job role, how what it entails? So, what's your typical day like? What's your typical week like? Are you traveling? Are you in the office? Are you out and about? How exactly is it?
So my role, my current title is Regional Medical Director, and it's similar. It's very, very, very similar to a medical science liaison. So on paper, it's the same role. So I'll just talk about medical science liaison, where we all know sales reps. They go out, they pound the pavement, they go into the doctor's offices pretty frequently to make sure they have what they need to prescribe. They have the messages that, you know, healthcare advertising puts together. They have their plan of like what they want doctors to know. But it's all of that is bookended by what the FDA says they can talk about, because the FDA has reviewed what the drug does, what the data says, and sales cannot go beyond that. Even if there's new research, even if the doctors are like, I've tried it in my other patients, like a different, I'll use rheumatology, for example, because there's a lot of diseases under that category. I have rheumatoid arthritis patients, and I have, let's say, lupus patients, and don't take notes on this because it's not real. I'm making this up. But, you know, there may be a drug in RA that can work in lupus, and a doctor can make that decision for themselves and do it. But the sales reps cannot, they can't talk about any of that because it has not been verified by our federal agencies that are designed to protect patients. And the doctor has the best interest, but how does the doctor ever find that out? They find it out from me because I'm the medical person. I have a PhD, and I can have this scientific engagement with them to tell them, this is what the research says. We still do clinical trials on it. This is the data from it. This is the conference data. Doctors have their patients that they prioritize, but they still have to get the information. So that's the baseline of what we do. And my day-to-day, there's no standard day, but my day-to-day really is going out, talking to doctors. So I do travel. I'm in rare disease, so my patient population isn't high. So I don't have a concentration of doctors in any particular area. So I do cover the whole East Coast. But for a disease like diabetes, that's pretty prevalent. Some of those territories are a little bit smaller. And I go out, I pound the pavement too. I go and meet with the doctors at their office, sometimes before their clinic hours. So, you know, maybe we can meet over breakfast because they're like, hey, I only have time. It's my breakfast time, or it's my lunch time, or after clinic, you know, I normally get dinner at this time. And to kind of like, you know, work with their schedule, I can go to dinner with them, but we have to talk science. So this is not just hanging out. You do make friends, but it's important that the science gets discussed with integrity, with accuracy. So I have to know all of that. And that's pretty much my day is, you know, I'm answering emails. The doctors will call me, text me, email me questions, or, hey, I heard about this. What do you know about it? That, you know, sometimes they consult with me on their patients. I don't give them medical advice. I just give them the data that I have. So they'll say, hey, I have a patient who's experiencing this. I don't think it's due to the medicine, but like, has this ever happened before? And I can say yes or no, it has happened, or no, it hasn't. Can you tell me more about it? I kind of like work through some of those processes with them. So sometimes it's both of us discovering something. But that's pretty much the day in and day out. I attend conferences with them, or sometimes on their behalf, because again, they might be busy with patients. So, you know, I always check in and say, hey, are you attending the conference? Maybe we can talk there. Or if they can't attend, I usually ask and say, hey, are there any sessions you're interested in? I'd love to, you know, learn what you want to learn and go back and deliver that. Company-wise, usually the company will also put together like a summary of the disease state things and teach us pretty quickly. So we have to absorb that information quickly. And then I go out and educate based on that as well.
Jace, do you want to go?
Sorry, I thought you were about to go. No, that sounds pretty intense. And I guess it's very different from what I thought industry, or what my perception of industry is. Because you think of like in academia, it's not a typical 9 to 5, because sometimes you're in the weekend, sometimes you're in kind of like late at night. Whereas in industry, you're working kind of a 9 to 5. You're working for a specific time period. So I kind of thought maybe it was something like that. But then I know that you said that you're traveling around a lot, and that seems almost similar to kind of like people in academia. Like
well, there are roles. There are scientist roles that ladder up to like business development, management roles that are much more similar to academia. So there are spaces that feel a lot more like academia. I'm just not in one of those. I'm after that, all that's packaged, or like towards the end of like phase 3 is usually right when they're about to get approval, things like that. That's when they bring in my role to go out and educate, communicate, get feedback, even if they're still in clinical trials. So I'm kind of just after that role. So there are roles that are similar to academia and industry.
Okay. I was going to say, speaking of busy schedules, AJ, you say that you're running, not only are you running a lab, but you're also owning a consulting firm. How exactly are you balancing it, or balancing both? And also, what exactly are you consulting on, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay, so yeah, I can tell you kind of in general for some things, because there's some people that I can't say who I'm consulting for, especially on a recorded line. So a couple of things. So as far as the lab, how I manage it is there is a kind of like a support team, if you will, outside of the laboratory. So I have a life coach, a counselor, and also a career development and professional coach help the team to be able to be efficient. And so this time management individual, who's also a life coach, she really helps organize our schedule so that we can get the most out of things. Like, for example, we started our lab in less than 6 months. We have 1 research paper, 1 review out, 3 DEI papers, 4 STEM education papers that are in review, 2 more research papers that are in review. So we maximize every year, and then we just now are writing another one. So that gives you an example. So we've become way more efficient with our time because of the time management person, but we also try to not work past like 6 or 7. Some days we have to, but we try to manage that, and I listen to the lab. So when we need time off, we take time off. So if we're working from home, we're just working from home. It's not about trying to be performative for anybody else at Vanderbilt. It's just what my lab needs, and I listen to that, and they work absolutely out of this world. So sometimes we may take like a work at home where we're working, but it's not going to be as heavy for maybe a whole week. And that actually produces so much more productivity. I've had 2 postdocs work from home, even though, kind of we're in that kind of we can work now against phase, but that mental health check allows them to be so, inspirational. Like I'm surprised at what my postdocs can do. I mean, I'm really surprised at what my staff scientist does, because she has dual jobs. She's the lab manager and a staff scientist. So she's training individuals, she's working with students, and she helps run some of my DEI STEM education portfolio. And we have a consultant to help us do that. So we have 2 other consulting firms that help filter out some of these DEI requests and things like that, so that we can kind of, keep the engine moving for research. And then we also have a writing team. So it's expensive, I'm going to tell you. So just word of advice, when you sign up for a laboratory and you get a starter package, ask for a lot, because it can be used to do a lot of things, more than what you would think. so that you can be productive. And also being a minority, specifically if everybody's Black on the phone, you need this so that you can be productive and so that you can go beyond the status quo of what someone would expect at your stage, right? And you want to be able to keep that consistency. So now back to the question. We use other consultant firms to be able to help manage the writing. So basically we'll write drafts, we'll write grants, we'll get them to a place where we think is really good and polished. But then what happens is actually we find out that they're not so polished. And so what we do is we edit them again. We actually send it out for mock grant review as well. And so this helps us to get comments and to address these grants. And it's very helpful. And it allows us to be able to be very productive. Like since joining, I've had 2 career development awards, but what's more fun is that like my postdoc, she has a fellowship. It'll be announced next year. I can't say what it is, but like I have to wait, but I'm excited. And then, I have 2 pilot grants and we submitted a myriad of different other grants. So hopefully everybody else in my lab will be just as successful. But the point is that because of the components of what we're talking about, this is how we're able to stay ahead of the curve and be productive. And remember, you're just a word of mentoring advice. You're actually not competing against anybody. Make sure that you're competing for yourself. So that way you don't have to compare yourself to anyone else. So just FYI. Now on the DEI and also the STEM education consulting space, oh boy, I've consulted for some very large companies. I can talk in general. I've consulted for a company that makes like cartoons. I've consulted for companies that are huge publications. I've consulted for companies that are industry companies that have famous individuals. So that's just in general. I can't say things because I would get in trouble because it's breaking confidentiality. And then I've consulted for large consulting companies when they don't kind of know what to do with the DEI space. And I usually partner with Schuler Consulting to do a lot of that. So she provides a lot of infrastructure from my lab, but also I partner with her to do other consulting gigs because sometimes the jobs are too large. So you also have to know your bandwidth and don't be afraid to pull it back if you need to. So that's kind of in general. I can't say so much on the consulting, but I can tell you how to run a consulting company if you care, but I just can't tell you more details. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I feel like I'm learning so much from both sides. I'm hearing science communication, consultancy. I think what's beautiful as well is that both of you have PhDs, and PhD is often seen as this thing where it's like, okay, you just go into academia and you stay there, you stay in the lab, you write papers and you disappear and that's it. And I guess both of you have like shown everybody listening and watching that a PhD is basically a stepping stone to anything essentially. But I guess with every career journey, as much as it has highs, it has lows as well. So I think I just want to go a little bit into, as much as you're comfortable sharing, just the low points in your journey and how you got through that. And looking back as well, what would you tell yourself when you were going through that period?
So I mentioned that I had to start over, so that was definitely a low point. But I will say, as a Black woman, first PhD in my family, my granddaddy was an aerospace engineer, just fresh out of North Carolina A&T, and during that time, people got PhDs, but it wasn't needed. And he did very well in his career. He likes to say he worked on the successful Apollo. And my mom has her master's, but I think one low point for me was when I maxed out everyone's knowledge and no one that I loved and trusted could really help me get to, solve whatever problem I was having. And it was the first time that I felt like my mom has always been there for me, always nurtured me, always helped me critically think and problem solve. And it was the first time that I ever got an I don't know from her. I was like, if she doesn't know, nobody knows. And how am I going to do this? And so that was a low moment for me. I was at Costco gas station, I'll never forget, because I broke down. I was crying. The Costco attendant's running out. Like, is everything okay? What's happening? And so that was a low point. Feeling so alone. And when I looked around, my counterparts had parents that had PhDs, parents that worked in industry, small biotech startups, a project waiting for them, networking, telling them, oh, just talk to this person. They know this person. Or, oh, we can work backwards, get you a job and put fire in the seat of your commit. Like they had this pathway out before they ever started. And I'm getting my first, I don't know. And I was like, well, I'm not getting out of here. So there were a lot of times, and like I said, I grew up in California. Wake Forest is in North Carolina, clear across the country. And every Christmas I would go home, and every year I didn't know if I was getting on that plane to go back. But I'll never forget, my best friend had gave me the advice, because I had always also been, high strung, like high success, like we gotta get it. And so I did not want to experience failure. I had been so used to like getting success because I dreamed it, I visioned it, I went after it. And this was not playing out the way that I thought. And I felt terrible. I became clinically depressed and everything. I felt terrible that I was like, I'm just gonna quit. I don't want to do this. And I had conviction behind it. And I was scared of what that looked like. I was scared of what the failure looked like because I didn't have a plan anymore for what happened after. And I'll never forget my best friend. He's smarter than me, but he graduated high school, didn't go to college, but he's so smart. And I always envied that about him, that he was just like, I can do whatever I want to do, no letters behind my name, whatever. And he told me, he was like, I won't be disappointed. You have not failed. I won't be disappointed if you don't do it. No one is going to be disappointed if you don't finish, because they still love you, they still support you. And that was a moment for me because, again, I was contemplating, am I going to get on this plane? It was the night before my flight. And it was the first time I saw what real support looked like and what a village was supposed to do, because I really felt like my success was tied to my identity. And so that was the first time I felt that. And then in grad school, I had a therapist because there was a student wellness committee. She changed my life. She's my friend now. She changed my life. My mom has a psychology degree, but like therapy wasn't a thing that we did. And so having this woman who was not Black, by the way, but having this woman take care of me emotionally when I'm broken, I'm beaten, I don't have my support because they're in California, having her put me back together so gently and so peacefully and so gracefully, and every step, like she was the second person who told me, it's okay. It's okay to decide not to do it. It's okay to decide to do something else. It's okay to decide to do nothing. To have somebody reinforce that that's okay. It's okay to rest. That was overcoming the low point. And even she was the one who pretty much died. She's not a psychotherapist, so she doesn't prescribe drugs, but she got me to and through the moment of like, I can't help you anymore because something else is happening. And she worked with me to find a psychiatrist who they partnered together to get me back healthy. And I was on antidepressants as long as it was safe. So it worked. But what I learned was you can't just go on for 3 months and come off because it's not safe. So there's like a window of time that it has to be safe. So I was on as long as it was safe. But we worked out that plan, and she destigmatized that for me. And she helped me like talk with my family about it. And so what I learned to do was build a village where I was. And that is what I'll say is like super important to overcoming that is you have your mentors for your career and your success and your journey and your path. But you also have to have somebody outside of that to vent to help you think about things that are not related to this, to give you a break. It could be a mental break, a physical break. Like I learned that physically getting away from something does something for your body. So you got to have that side of it too. You got to have a mentor outside that's completely unrelated to science, completely unrelated to success. You got to have like a fun mentor or someone that you can vent to about everything, about how hard it is, about I feel I feel there's racism towards me. I don't know it yet. How do I navigate that? How do I navigate, what does rest look like for a Black woman? Women, we don't rest. What does rest look like? You gotta have somebody to pull you away. And I promise you, you'll be kicking and screaming to be pulled away. But you have to have somebody strong enough to just like hold you down and say, we need to step away just for a little bit. Someone to kind of put some things in perspective for you. So those were the things that got me through. Having my village, recognizing that my success is not my identity. My love for myself, my vision, the things that I enjoy, the things that are fun to me, my values, those are me. And everything else is supplemental. And then having that fun mentor outside to kind of get you away, break the ice, break the silence, break the pressure. Those were the things that really got me through my lowest moments.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Like, again, noting so much down, it's really important to have, like, as you said, the mentorship and the outside support system and everyone putting you together. Like, sometimes you can get lost in the academic bubble or just career focus, and people that know you outside of that vision that you have for yourself is really good. Thank you.
I kind of want to piggyback. First, everything you said was amazing. I want to just talk about counseling. If it wasn't for my postdoc mentor, Dale, I would have never known that like counseling was okay to do. Like I kind of like maybe dabbled in it, like a session. I didn't realize that I was going to see like the senior associate dean of diversity like all the time. So I had like kind of informal counseling shoots. So let's come by and talk, right? So it wasn't like, nothing like serious, but I would stop by a lot, but I didn't formalize anything until I got to postdoc because I realized I needed help because I was thinking I was in a very white space in Iowa. It's more than 90% white. So everywhere I go, like there's not like a lot of diversity. And so for me, I was really scared about trying to not only fit in so that I wouldn't be like stopped all the time or things like that, but also just trying to manage and navigate the space and not disappoint because my boss is Black and he's running the department in a very white, university, and they're also looking at him. Although like he was Teflon, like, nothing was going to happen to him. But in my mind, this is what I was thinking. And so it was a challenge and it was magnifying what I like had going on. And so he recommended counseling and it actually changed my life. I mean, and it was also from an individual that didn't look like me. And she was very relatable. And the reason I bring it up was because she helped my marriage. She helped my relationships before I had a marriage. She helped me to really find myself. She helped me to explain things to my family. She also helped me to realize like it's okay not to be okay. And so I want you all to kind of really know that like when you're not okay, it's okay to get help. It's okay to really focus your efforts on getting well, because without doing that in a safe way, you're not going to be able to be all that you can be in science. And science is important, but your life and who you are is important. And the community structure that you have around you can really change who you are as an individual. And that's what I wanted to say. So I know it's a little bit different than what I was supposed to respond to, but I just wanted to make sure that for this part, like to echo what she's saying, I just want you guys to really pay attention to what she said. She's been saying everything like amazingly, but this point in particular is really, really important. And I cannot stress it enough.
Thank you for sharing that. We needed to hear that, I think. I think hearing people who've kind of like gone, are doing things that you want to achieve and hearing that they've been through like low moments and you've come out of it wonderfully, I might add, since you're doing so well. It kind of gives us the confidence that what, like if you're going through rough times or whatever, you also can come out of it. I wanted to, since it's the last few minutes, I've kind of got a question that I've been hearing it a lot on the kind of different podcasts that I listen to, and I think it's quite an interesting question. The question is, what would you tell a teenage version of yourself, following after everything you've achieved and what up to the stage that you've got to now? What's a question? What's something that you would tell the teenage version of yourself right now?
That's a good question. I would just tell a teenage version of myself just to keep having fun. Like, again, it's okay to walk away for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Because there was a moment in grad school, I had a friend and she would always invite me to do stuff. And I was so just bogged down that like asking me to spend $5 was out of this world. And I look back on those days and I'm like, I should have just spent the $5. So, you know, I would tell my younger self, like, keep having fun. Because I felt like I was always confident. I always knew who I was. And I stayed true to that. So I would probably remind myself to stay true to who you are. And I might also tell myself, learn how to make friends. Because making friends as an adult is really hard. Because you make friends a lot of times by proximity. And I had chased my career and moved so many places that when I needed to build a village, I didn't know how until I was literally what I just explained. I was broken all the way down. So I would tell myself, just keep having fun and learn how to make friends.
So I would tell my teenage self to like not stress so much about the future, you know, and I guess for me, like at the time, if it wasn't for my mom telling me you're gonna go pro in your brain and not like in sports, I would have been like so focused on sports. Like she told me, she was like, I had a good thing going with like science, but I kind of wish I would have like discovered that a little bit more because I was an athlete. So I played tennis, I did taekwondo. I was doing all kind of other things. I thought I was gonna be like Serena Williams, but the boy version, right? And so I mean, it was nice. I mean, it was nice to have people to look up to because, you know, that champion mentality is still in me. So I appreciate it. But one thing is that I wish I could have like had that conversation earlier with my mom. So I would have told myself to start talking to your mom about things that, you know, that you're uncomfortable with a lot sooner so that I could have had that conversation to really inspire the science in me and the math and, you know, everything. Maybe I would have taken like harder courses, things like that. And I would have discovered that champion swagger in science, not only in like sports. I wasn't that great, but in my mind, you know, I was great. So, so the point is that, you know, like that would have been it. And then another thing would have been to just tell myself to spend more time with your family, because, you know, COVID's changed a lot, and you know, you don't really get to see all the people that you usually get to see. So having your family and spending time with them, because you just never know you know, the day nor the hour, you know, that someone can pass away. And so that to me, I think is very important. And I wish I would have had more memories. I had a lot, but you know, just more, just to enjoy yourself in different ways. And I also echo, you know, friendships are important. I would have told my, you know, teenage self to continue to develop friendships more deeply, because when you chase your career goals, you do forget about the things that matter. And the real things that matter in life, not so much about the job. And so that for me is, I think, so important to always keep in mind, is to continue to fortify your friendships and don't let them fall through the cracks, because they will be your support system no matter where you go. Because it's hard to find good quality friends these days because everybody's worried about keeping up with the Joneses or taking over or pulling you away from the top and putting you back in the barrel. So there's all that, you know, so you have to really kind of be mindful of that. So enjoy that process. So that's what I would say.
It's really awesome. Thank you for that. And to look to the future, it's a bit of a personal question. Where do you see yourself? And it's an interview style question. Don't take it as an interview. But like in like 10, 20, 30 years time, what's like your biggest goal? What do you want to achieve in the next stage of your career? Like you've done pretty well so far, but how much further are you looking to go? If you don't mind me asking.
Oh, all the way. I said when I retire, I'd go back to healthcare advertising as a medical consultant, because that job was a lot of fun. It's a creative space, but I still got to be the scientist. And I will say, when I got my PhD, because all your grad school friends also get PhDs, but when I got mine, like I felt like they were like, oh, Dr. Martin, Dr. Ayana, they loved it. They loved to elevate that because it felt so normal to me at that point. Like I had just got it, so I had my PhD, or it felt new and normal because my other friends had PhDs. But I want to talk about science as long as I have breath. I want people to appreciate it, to learn from it, take the good with the bad, even though I couldn't do it on the MD side. I'm asking a lot, but anyone who will listen to me talk about science, because I like to make science fun for them, interesting for them, because it opens your mind, it opens your brain, like it opens the imagination. It really does. So I will retire technically, but I won't ever stop doing what I love. And I have to drop. So I will say thank you so much for having me. I guess if you guys want to reach out to me, my Twitter handle is paging Dr. Martin, all spelled the way it's supposed to. Doctor is DR. And I think if you get me there, I can give you the rest of the contact information. But thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry I have to jump. Life of a MSL, I got to catch a plane. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank you so
being
much
here.
for your time.
I think I've seen my dream career in a person. So I'm so excited. So I will be dropping you a message. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Take
Thanks
care.
for having me again.
Safe flight. Bye.
For me, in 20, 30 years, I want to be better than my boss, Dale. I mean, he has like an H index of 90. So, to see a Black man like killing the game like that, it makes me think I can do it. So I walk around with a certain type of swagger already. Like, I'll be like him. I at least know I could be as good as him because he trained me, but I'm trying to also be like better than him. And then like, I look at like people like Eric Jarvis, who's the HHMI investigator. I want to be like him. Kofi, who just got it. Like, I want to be like them, but I want to be better than them too, because I feel like I want to push for like a Nobel Prize. I mean, whether it's a peace prize or, in medicine, I don't care. If I'm going to be truthful, I have some lofty goals, and even if I don't reach them at the end of the day, I already know that in my lifetime, just in the short period of, 33 years, I've reached so many people. And so I'm already proud of that, but I hope to reach, an infinite number more people where they're inspired to be out. And, it may not need to be directly that wins the Nobel Prize, but somebody that I train may win the Nobel Prize. And so for me, that's good enough. Like, I've accomplished that goal because, the majority of the people that I train are minorities. So especially if one of them wins, that's just a beautiful thing, because we often are not thought of as scientists or people that can do, a Nobel Science Prize or medicine prize. We're thought of people that can be, awesome in literature or a peace prize, but not in, the sciences. And so for me, that's what I dream of, truthfully. And I dream of watching the individuals that are just killing the game, and so I want to be like that, and I will be like that. And even if I don't get HHMI, I'm still going to be a boss. I mean, so for me, that's how I think. And that's my mentality of doing things. And so that's what I see. But personally, I also see like, selling, my intellectual properties, retiring early and just doing science for the sheer fun of it, not worried about grants because I can fund my lab for my intellectual properties, something like that, so that's what I'm kind of like hoping. So it's a really a win-win situation where I can go home 9 to 5, maybe publish, after, 15 years where I've done like lots of papers, 10 or 15 papers a year. I can just enjoy the science and publish kind of, and study what I want because I can be self-funded, right? And so I'm not in a rush. I can really take my time, not to meet a grant deadline, but really focus on, the potential of what a project could be. So that's kind of where I want to get to, so that I can really open myself up to discovering things in a different way where it's not pressed upon a deadline. So that's it.
That's awesome. Like, I think I almost got goosebumps just listening to it. Like, I'm like, it's really amazing to hear someone kind of like verbalize those dreams, because you don't really hear many people say, oh, I want to like win a Nobel Peace Prize, or I want to do this. Everyone kind of like keeps keeps it to themselves, and I don't know, it's just really cool and really awesome to hear you say that. So yeah, you've inspired me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think I was expecting a more like academic talk. So this is like so cool just to see, even though you're running your own lab and you're doing this thing that is very academic on paper when people just first like glance at what you do, but how multifaceted what you do on a daily basis, and also your background in like sports and science and bringing that energy into science, making science cool as well. I think all of that is just really, really inspiring, and it's just thank you so much for giving us your time as well.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I was on mute.
Fantastic. I think that's our time. So just want to say thank you again, Dr. Hinton, and also Ayana, who's left. I think for the next hour or so, we're going to have a networking session on social media. So I think if anyone has any jobs and are looking for applicants, then put it on there using the hashtag Black in Cardio Careers or BIC Careers. And if anyone's also looking for opportunities, looking for jobs, looking for roles, also shoot your shot and put it out there. And hopefully you might get found. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Hinton, and we'll speak again soon.
Bye.
Bye.